And welcome to the purpose of this book with David G and David G. T minus two, second to last meeting on our 2 year roughly journey on Wednesday nights. It's been fun. So we're excited to be coming down the home stretch here. And then first week of June, we're going to be starting back up Fridays, 3:30 Central Time, 9:30 in the UK. So we look forward to all of our British friends joining us. And we're going to be doing taking the steps, take the 12 steps in 12 weeks with an emphasis on helping people move swiftly through the steps. So either come and take the steps with us yourself and or learn how to take people through the steps efficiently as well. So we'll be sending more information about that. But tonight we're picking up. We are late in the chapter of Vision for You. We're on page 160, very bottom paragraph, starts with the very practical approach. David, do you want to set anything up before we get started here?
I would just say if we read the prior paragraph to what David just pointed out there, here's a guy coming out of the hospital, yet a little bit dazed, crosses the threshold. This time the threshold is not a trigger like in the in Fred's story where he crossed the threshold and he took a drink. So remember, that's a joke. You got to read the story. Um, and then it says, he succumbed to a gay crowd. So a lot of these, the words that Bill's using in that prior paragraph are words that he used when he was in the Mayflower Hotel. You know, the sounds of the laughter of the gay crowd in the bar and all these kind of things. So I just looked at the similarities there. But it talked about hear the story of some men whose experience closely tallied his own. So looking for similarities, not differences. That's the same thing I should be doing in meetings. Did I drink, think, or feel like that person? Not looking for differences. His eyes were wide open. That undefinable something in his eyes of the men. You remember Ebby and Bill's story? He had that starry-eyed look. You know, so there's something different in a recovered alcoholic that I'm attracted to for sure. So, and then it says the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place conspired to let him know that here was a haven at last. So I have finally arrived. I have finally arrived at my destination or at a starting point, anyways. And the starting point for me, what he's talking about here is fellowship, one part of the triangle. But what early members did is the group would bring the prospect to the base of the triangle: recovery, the unity, the fellowship. And no wonder they had so many members stay sober, because that's what they did. They brought them to all three parts of the triangle. So that's all I got.
Cool. Okay, here we go. Bottom of 160. The very practical approach to his problems, the absence of intolerance of any kind, the informality, the genuine democracy, the uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. He and his wife would leave elated by the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance and his family. They knew they had a host of new friends. It seemed they had known these strangers always. They'd seen miracles, and one was to come to them. They had visioned the great reality, their loving and all powerful creator.
I have a few: intolerance, lack of open mindedness, informality, casualness or ease, uncanny, unusual or unexpected, irresistible, overpowering in appeal, elated, excited or delighted, stricken, having been struck with or by.
Thank you, June. So I see this is a paragraph that, if you remember, in the first 43 and a half pages of this book, Bill really points out what's blocking us. You know, what untreated alcoholism looks like. He's talking about in those 43 and a half pages in the front of the book: selfishness, resentment, self-delusion, fear, self-esteem, self-pity. All these things that are blocking me that I don't have the power to remove are now once removed because of the promise on page 27, having had that vital spiritual experience that Carl Jung talks about with Roland Hazard. And this just happens automatically as promised in the 10 step. So in that paragraph, the very practical approach to his problems, which is untreated alcoholism, which is the malady, which is the obsession, and he doesn't have a craving because he's the absence, but his absence also of intolerance of any kind. So, he's not fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. We're talking about not being irritable, restless, and discontented any longer. It's like, all the things that unmanageability looks like. And then on to the next page, he and his wife would leave elated about the thought of what could now do for some stricken acquaintances and his family. So we're thinking of others. Page 20, that we have to have a constant thought of others all the time. So also I hear when he say him and his wife, this is something that I think is really important in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, or Cocaine Anonymous, or DA, or AA, or Al-Anon, whatever you're part of today, is to invite my wife in to my recovery. And I see a lot of people that do it; they don't, And I think it's so important. Like when we have special events, picnics, bowling, dinners, invite them to come along. Why not? I did that in the very beginning, but it says, so what the wife is experiencing here is hope is being restored. Hope is being restored because I kept stealing her hope constantly. And then it says they knew they had a host of new friends. So this is the fellowship. I finally arrived. And they had seen miracles, and the one was to come to them. So this is a miracle. Sobriety is a miracle. This is the moment that I live in today. There's a miracle. A bunch of phone calls today from people I work with, and their lives have changed 180 degrees. I take zero amount of credit for it. I'm just the messenger. That's all I am. But it's just amazing. Like as soon as they pick up the phone, and I recall what it was like 2 years ago when they called. I'm going through the court system. My wife just left me, and all the things that happened to us, and it happened to me too. But today they're elated. They're exactly excited about that job and that new promotion, or that car that doesn't break down any longer, or that relationship they were able to get back with their kids. These are miracles that I couldn't perform on my own power. I had that vital spiritual experience. And then the last thing, and it says they had vision, the great reality, which is God, their loving and all powerful creator, which is God. This is about a relationship with God.
Yeah, I think just a little context check here. We're late in the chapter, as I said, a vision for you. Well, who's the you? So we're 161 pages in. The you should be pretty clear, if you're still reading the book at this point, that you're a real alcoholic, right? Powerless physically and mentally, and overwhelmingly so, you get this terrible, burdensome spiritual malady, this unmanageability in your life. So what is the vision for you? What is the vision for me? The vision is there's a solution for me, that powerless and unmanageable person, to come in and to establish a new relationship with God, as David was just talking about. And then what? What's the ultimate vision? The ultimate vision is that I get real busy, as is obliged to me in the 12th step, right? First of all, I have that spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, the singular result of these steps. That's what I get delivered, right? From my thorough and honest approach to taking all the steps, I get this spiritual awakening through a new relationship with God as I understand Him. And then what do? Then I go about the business of continuing to stay into action, carrying this message to alcoholics and addicts, people that we find in our fellowships. I don't like to say try. I know it says the word try is in the 12th step there, but my spiritual guru Yoda, we all know what he says about trying, right? Do or do not. There is no try. It's not enough for me to try to carry this message. I must carry the message, right? It's okay if I am imperfect at it. It's okay if I have a little fear about it. Just do it. We have never, ever, as people in recovery, had it so easy to have so many great resources to learn how to carry the message effectively. We have so many amazing big book studies. We have so many amazing, not even have to say speaker tapes or speaker CDs anymore. We got these podcasts, and everybody does such an amazing job of foundation talks and first step talks and 2, 3, everything through 12. It's incredible. There's no excuse. And as David and I brought it many times on our little website, we've got an outline that we follow, how to get somebody through the steps quickly, right? Before our buddy Howard would say, before that window of opportunity for them to get the God slammed shut. Raju's here in the study with us tonight. He and I started working together a few weeks ago, and we're blistering. We're up going to do his 5th step here, and then we're going to go boom, 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 5, 6, 7 in the next few days, and then he'll be on to 8. And he said to me today, "Hey, a guy I met asked me to sponsor him." I said, "God bless. Go start sponsoring. Stay one step ahead of him. You're in great shape." Right? This is what we do. This is how we stay recovered, which is the sort of minimum. But this is how I grow in recovery, right? This is how I grow in understanding and effectiveness. Action, 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 more action. It is not an option in that 12th step, guys. I am obliged to pay it back, what I was given, and to pay it forward, right? I must keep that spiritual suit of armor on me and polished at all times. So that's the vision for me. And so what this paragraph is talking about is saying, hey, carry this vision to yourself and carry this vision to what you can give to other people. What can you give to other people? Well, they can have the same experience as the guy in the story here, right? That presenting to somebody a practical approach to his problems, and let them come in and see the absence of intolerance of any kind. Remember, love and tolerance of others is our code. The informality, right? We're not here in military service. We are here shoulder to shoulder, talking casually. This is not a lecture. This is just we're all students, we're all teachers, and we're all practitioners. We all got to wear all 3 hats as we walk this thing together. The genuine democracy, right? We didn't even get it really into the service part of our big book study that much in the last couple of years. We talk about service as it relates to carrying the message, but this whole service structure around how groups operate and how everything goes down triangle in the inverted triangle, right? That's the democracy he's referring to. The uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. That's what we have to offer, an uncanny understanding. I always remark when somebody comes in and they tell this terrible story of what happened the last time they were drinking, and we laugh. That's the uncanny understanding of laughing with them, not at them, because we did those crazy things too, right? He and his wife would be elated by the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance in his family. Man, oh man, oh man. So I started, I don't know, a year ago, when guys started coming to me and say, "Hey, we sponsor me, we take me through the work," I'll say, yes, as long as you understand what you're asking from me is you are signing up for a lifetime of service. So please let me know that you're all in on a lifetime of service, because that's exactly what this is about. The impression they made on this guy and his wife is they became elated by the opportunity of a lifetime of service. This is the message we need to carry. It's not a burden to be of service, that it is a great joy, right? And it is a great widening of my freedom, right? Freedom of the bondage of self and so many other things. They had a host of friends. It seemed they'd always known these strangers. Always, anybody here go to meetings when you're vacationing or on work trips, walk into a meeting in your fellowship, and you're like, man, I don't know anybody here, and I feel right at home, right? It's bad cup of coffee in an uncomfortable chair, and everyone's like, "Hi, David," right? I feel great. I never feel out of place at a 12-step meeting. I don't care where it is. And I've had the pleasure of going to some in Europe. It was fun, like in Italy and France. And our little joke, because my wife's, sober 18 years as well. And our joke when we went to an AA meeting in France is we expected they were going to be serving wine there, right? But they weren't. They were all dry and sober, and they had the same big book, and they had English version and they had French version. And we were all talking the same language, even if we weren't talking the same tongue. It was wonderful. And they had seen miracles, and one was to come to them. Boy, it's like we're the ghosts or the wise men, or pick your biblical analogy. We come bearing not just gifts, we come bearing miracles. We are these demonstrations of miracles, guys. This is the vision for you. This is the vision for me. This is the vision for the new people that we meet as we trudge along here, right? They visioned a great reality. Their loving and all-powerful creator. Man, oh man, oh man. I said it earlier, and David said it earlier. I picked it up off of him. This thing is all about my relationship with God. I do not have to go on a snipe hunt to find God. We'll learn back on page 55 where God's been living the whole time, deep down inside me in my belly. And I covered him up with as much alcohol and cocaine as I could. And then as soon as I knocked that out, I started to hear his little voice, right? And then everything went uphill from there. Moving on. Top of 161. Now, this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors for the number 60 or 80 as a rule. Alcoholics are being attracted from far and near. From surrounding towns, families drive long distances to be present. A community 30 miles away has 15 fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Being a large place, we think that someday its fellowship will number many hundreds. The footnote is this was written in 1939. What do you got, June? Nothing? Okay. Let me just jump in here, David. So I love this. It's written in 1939. And they're like, man, there's a community 30 miles from here. They got 15 people, right? I live, so it's 2025. I live in the middle of nowhere. Cornfields, woods, rural Illinois, and in a little town called Sandwich. And there's 4 meetings a week in Sandwich or neighboring towns. Actually, probably 6 if I include Plano, where my AA home group is. There's probably a rotation of 300 to 400 different people that I see semi-regularly going to these meetings just around here. I go a little east of here to Aurora, where David and I hits the meetings. Aurora's second biggest city in Illinois. If we looked on our phones, I bet we'd have 1,000+ names of people that we know from meetings just out here in a little area. And I got clean and sober in downtown Chicago, where I think they have 4,500 meetings a week in the city, some insane number, right? Because there's 5 million people in the city alone. There are so many of us. It's just such an amazing, when you think about the mushrooming that's described here. Remember, guys, 1939, Bill was the most sober guy in AA. He had 4 years, right? The equivalent of having 4 years in 1939 is like having, I don't know, 55 years probably today. You know, if you extrapolated the math. There were 77 roughly people when this thing was written, right? Bill rounded up to 100 because it's a nice even number. He's always selling. Look what we have. We're so spoiled, guys. We have to take advantage of this. We cannot take it for granted. We cannot take for granted all the people who came before us, how they built this up. We cannot take for granted the literature that's guided us the whole time. We cannot take for granted the traditions that protect the fellowship in the groups. We cannot take for granted those concepts that protect and grow and enhance the service structure. We cannot take anything for granted, because what does it mean when I'm taking things for granted? I'm sitting back on my laurels, content for what I did yesterday or last week, right? Which is not how I grow. I am not in action when I'm sitting on my laurels, right? I gotta keep this thing moving. I cannot take for granted. If I'm taking anything for granted, what does that really mean? I'm sitting in self. I am selfishly just letting things be, right? I'll answer the phone later. I'll call that guy back later. I'll hit another meeting later. Later. All these procrastination, right? All this sloth. I cannot. These guys, if we've learned nothing else from the historical parts described in this book, these guys were busy. These guys were in action. These guys were all about carrying the message all the time.
Yeah, so this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors. They number 60 to 80 is a rule. That's a really good sized meeting for sure.
Yeah.
And that's where they had meetings at. They had meetings at their home. Until later on in that paragraph, we'll find out that the first meeting in Cleveland, Ohio, that Clarence Snyder started, he claimed that was the first AA meeting. It was named an AA meeting because prior to that, the groups had this sect of the Oxford group.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so but he claims, others disagree. It doesn't really matter. It's just coming from something I read at one time or another. But his meeting at the Cleveland, Ohio was at Forest Hill Church in Cleveland, Ohio. So he had a first meeting at a church, and those fellows came, people came, but the word that sticks out to me the most in that paragraph is alcoholics are being attracted from far and near. Man, dude, that is my responsibility, being an attraction. You know, being a recovered alcoholic, dude, and Chris Raymer said this, Chris Raymer says this, should we be sunbeams for Jesus? Yeah. Yeah, we should be freaking happier and shit. Dude, this is how I am most of the time. I don't know how to tone it down. I am full of happiness, full of joy in my life today. And I didn't create any of it. because I just live my life as honestly and with integrity that was given to me by practicing and staying in steps 10 and 11 and 12, not harming other people today. But how do I attract at meetings? So if you have a home group, if you're at a home group, I'm going to get into the traditions for a little bit here for one moment. I'm just going to say you should attend your home group and you should participate at your home group and follow traditions, be informed about things before you have a vote. And some of the things that you can vote on at your home group is, what are your customs? Do you have a cake on birthdays? What day of the week you have your meeting? All these other things that can take place. But one of the customs could be that someone can have a position of being the welcomer, to approach the new person and make them feel welcome. And then afterwards, someone can also be, and I do this, and David does. We did this on Monday night with a new guy, a guy who came in for the first time in our meeting. We approached him after the meeting. We wanted him to be we want to be an attraction to him. We want him to come back because we are recovered, and this is the result of what recovery is. Now, you don't have to believe me, but this is about seeing, not necessarily about hearing. And if you're one of my guys that I work with, you'll come over to my house, you'll meet my wife, you'll meet my kids, you'll see how I live. And I got nothing to hide today. This is the way that I live. And I want to invite you in so that you can have a vision for what your life can look like. And I'm not talking in the monetary way. I'm just talking about in an honest, like having a good, healthy relationship, like actually with my mortgage and with my wife, and my pets, honestly, those are all things I didn't have a good relationship in the past. I'm just saying, but I do today. So being an attraction and wanting that person to come back to their second meeting, because what happens between that first meeting, or even between the first and the 30 days and the 30 days and the 60 days, they go away. They just go away because we stop paying attention to them. We don't bring them into the fold. And the fold is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's 164 pages that are folded, plus 8 pages of the doctor's opinion that I am armed with the facts about, and I will take them through that work, like David pointed out, rapidly. Take them through that quickly, and then sit them down with the traditions right after that, and take them through that work too. But and then we watch these meetings grow, and not all meetings that don't grow, I'm just saying, shouldn't stay in business. They should go away if they're not talking about solution. Go away. And we got a guy that comes to our Sunday group, and he's always trying to promote that Tuesday. That I won't say what night it is, because in case you live around here, he's always trying to promote the people to come to that meeting. And it's like, I've been to that meeting. Don't go to that meeting. Go to a different meeting. It's all about war stories and how we're going to fix each other. This is not a self-help program. If it was a self-help program, I wouldn't have to be here. My life would have been a whole lot better. I would have fixed myself. You know what my fix is? Take a drink and get a big bag of cocaine. And then the result of that is I get locked up and almost covered up. That's what my result is, always. I know the truth today. It's about solution, knowing the problem and solution. And I live in the solution, which again goes right back to having a powerful relationship with my creator.
Okay, moving on. But life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending gatherings and visiting hospitals. Hold on. Let's make sure everybody heard that. But life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending gatherings and visiting hospitals. Cleaning up old scrapes, helping to settle family differences, explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents, lending money and securing jobs for each other when justified. These are everyday occurrences. No one is too discredited or is sunk too low to be welcomed cordially if he means business. Social distinctions, petty rivalries, and jealousies, these are laughed out of countenance. Being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others, the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they?
I have a few. I have old scrapes, which are bad or embarrassing situations. Irate means angry or enraged. Justified, shown to be right or valid. Countenance, shown to be disapproved with laughter. Attuned made aware or responsive, and signify means to have importance or meaning.
Thank you, June. Yeah, so I know what David's going to go, so I won't necessarily get into that first sentence there. But meetings were never intended us to keep us sober. That's all I'm going to say about that. But cleaning up old scrapes, helping to settle family differences, explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents, lending money, securing jobs for each other when justified. These are everyday occurrences. So that kind of reminds me of when Bill's talking about the 12 inconveniences on page 97. You know, Bill had this fascination with the number 12. So I'm going to go to that page 97 in the first paragraph and talk about exactly what David was talking about, a lifetime of service. And these are the things that are going to occur in my life. And they don't even bother me today. I know they're coming. It's just part of the routine of carrying the message. It's just how this works. But I also noticed that if they do the work honestly and thoroughly, all these things change in their life. So let's go to page 97. I'm going to read the whole paragraph if you don't mind. Never, oh yeah, never's a must. Never must. Avoid these responsibilities. Be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of a recovery. Oh, the foundation stone of a recovery is step 12. Good to know. I need to know what that stone is. A kindly act of once in a while isn't enough. It is not enough. I always have to be of service. So then it says you have to act a good Samaritan. Another must. A good Samaritan every day if need be. That is the first inconvenience. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep. Number 2, great interference with your pleasures. Interruptions to your business. Number 3, it may mean sharing your money in your home. Number 4, counseling frantic wives and relatives. Number 6, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. 7, your telephone may jangle at any time, day or night. I know that David says that Bill S always calls him up on the phone and leaves him a message. Hey, I'm just jangling you on the phone right now, so call me back. So taking words out of the big book are fun. A drunk may smash your furniture in your home or burn your mattress. You may have to fight him if he is violent. Sometimes you have to call a doctor and administer sedatives. Never had to do that yet, and don't think I ever will. Another time you have to send for a police or an ambulance. Occasion you will have to meet such conditions. Doesn't mean I'm gonna meet them all, and it doesn't happen every single time. But I have to be willing to know that this is the fact that they're not exactly bringing in anything less than chaos into my life. And if you don't have a girlfriend, and all of a sudden you think you need one, that just complicates my life doubly because now you think you need to have a relationship. I think you would probably kill a cactus because of lack of water, but I'm just saying I'm not the arbor of anyone's sex life, so that I don't go there. But this is a very lengthy paragraph. And the other thing I want to talk about is halfway, 2/3 through the page, it says being wrecked in the same vessel. And that's a reference to what on page 17 in our third paragraph. And I'm just going to do that one briefly, and I'll turn it over to David.
Let's do it.
So, or actually in the second paragraph here. So again, Bill talking about this, he says, middle of that paragraph, we are passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck. So after rescue from shipwreck, when the camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy. So Bill uses the word a couple of times. He used democracy in the last page. He's using it here, and he uses it one more time. Pervade the vessel from steerage to captain table. So from the top to the bottom. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy and escape from disaster does not subside as we go on our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in common peril is one element. So knowing what the problem is, that I have an alcohol and cocaine problem. Obvious, I know that. When I'm locked up in jail, everybody else does too. But that does not resolve my issue. I have to know both parts, problem and solution. And then it says, it's one element in the powerful cement that binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Why? The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we've discovered a common solution, a program of action. We have a way out. That's a promise on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. Again, action. This is the great news this book carries of those who suffer from alcoholism. So Bill uses a couple references many times in the book, but he's getting his point across. And what is that? 140 some pages, 3 pages later. I mean,
Yeah.
or 44 pages later. It just makes sense to me, the fact that, yeah, I can't forget the fact that I have no power, no choice, no control, but I don't suffer from the craving because I don't put cocaine or alcohol in my body. The obsession's been removed. My life is not unmanageable any longer. It's a relationship with God. I've turned my will and my life over to the care of Him. I live in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12. And then because of what that's read on the bottom of page 161 in the second paragraph, and then it says, being restored and united with one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. Like putting others' common welfare before my own is me being successful, which we're talking about in the bedevilments on page 52. When I'm feeling useless, I now today feel useful, which may be the key to life. In the hearts and mind attuned to the welfare of others, the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? And there's the question. That's all I got.
Hmm. But life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending gatherings. Man, oh man. So I was listening to Joe Hawk a week or two ago. Rest in power, Joe Hawk, man, one of my favorite speakers, maybe my favorite speaker. Great at breaking down the book. He had this to say as listening. And going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous by themselves does not mean you're in the program, because there are three parts to this program. What part of the program am I in? What legacy am I practicing when going to meetings? Unity, I guess, assuming I'm participating and, doing more than just filling a seat, right? Participating, talking to people, hanging out before or after I'm in it, right? But there's three parts. How about the recovery? How about the base of our triangle? Without which I'm not going to do anything about that spiritual malady that's pervading everything from my scalp on down to my toes. Here's the other thing that Joe said. The only requirement to be a member is not the only requirement to stay sober. So if I declare, and I'm paraphrasing the long form of the third tradition, that I'm alcoholic and I want to do something about it, and I'm eligible to be a member of the fellowship, right, of AA at large as a whole. But just because I'm a member doesn't mean that's all it's going to take for me to get sober. And by the way, getting sober, getting physically sober, that's way early on in the spectrum of how my life is going to grow and change. The physical sobriety is a necessity for me to ultimately get recovered. And I take great pains to say this all the time when people are like, oh man, you see a newcomer, he's white knuckling it. Like, who didn't white knuckle it when they came in? What tool do I have? When I'm used to drinking all the time, and then I show up to a meeting and they're like, hey, we don't drink here, right? We got this program, we're going to get you spiritual solution, get to God. And I'm like, okay, that all sounds fine and dandy, assuming I'm willing to accept that. But what do I do on day 2? And what do I do on day 10? Even if I'm doing the work aggressively, it takes a little bit of time to get to God. Maybe if I'm lucky, I don't know, a few weeks or a month or something. But what the hell do you think I'm supposed to do at the beginning? I am holding on for dear life. All right. My knuckles are so white, they're practically translucent. That is the nature of what I've got to do at the beginning, right? But I got to do more. The book tells me repeatedly, action and more action. Got to be in that program recovery and all the action that comes along with it, including, as I talked about earlier, carrying this message. It's obliged to me to do. And I got to be in service. Most basic part of service is carrying the message, taking somebody through the work, right? But then there's so much more I can do beyond that. All right. It's more, so much more than this. And then David talked about this next little part, so I won't double down too much on that. But I do sort of a little bit through here. I'll underscore a couple of these ideas. No one's too discredited or is sunk too low to be welcomed cordially if he means business. If he means business. So the guy asked me the other night, this guy David mentioned, we saw him at our Monday night CA home group, and intense guy, man. He was talking and the face of things he said, David and I were just like a tractor beam to go talk to him afterwards, right? Because this guy needs some help. And talked to him a little bit and said, I need a sponsor, and asked me if I'd sponsor him. I said, hey, yeah, I probably said sure. Hopefully I said, sure, we can talk about it. Because there's some things to talk about first. You know, and I really picked this up from David. Qualifying the guy, making sure he wants what we have, and really getting a commitment that he's willing to go to any length, or as Bill says here, if he means business. So as we understood from talking to this guy a little bit, he's clean from cocaine for 5 years, which is great if you're in CA. But if you're in CA, we're abstinent of all mind-altering substances. And he said, well, I still drink sometimes. So we're gonna have a little conversation with him and say, listen, buddy, I only know one way in CA. This is all or nothing. Now, you're welcome to attend. You can come to meetings. We can be buddies. Happy to chit chat. But I can't take you through steps. I can't sponsor you if you're not willing to give it all up, because I know where this road goes. You know how many times I stopped doing cocaine and I was just drinking? Anybody else? I always put that in quotes. Anybody else try just drinking? Yeah. How'd that work out? Right? If you're powerless over cocaine like I am, just drinking gets me just drunk, or I called the just dealer to drop me off a just bag of coke, right? This is all or nothing for me. This is a spiritual program of action where I must be free of all these mind-altering substances, right? But the other point that's being made here, you know, no one's too discredited, no one's sunk too low. So should the state, like, all it's because they're saying, like, again, all these petty things. We put all this stuff aside, and David took us back to that description and more about alcohol. Or there is a solution, right? From the captain's table, which was the elite wealthy people, to steerage, which is the poor people sleeping down next to the furnace. We are all the same in our disease, and we are all the same in our solution. There is no caste system in 12-step recovery, right? We're sort of one nation of children under our Father, under God. It's all equal here. You know, another thing I stole from David, maybe he got it from somebody else. God has no grandchildren. We are all equally children of God. We are all on the same level. Okay, moving on. Very bottom of 161. Under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many Eastern cities. In one of these, there is a well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction. 6 years ago, one of our number was a patient there. Many of us have felt for the first time the presence and power, notice those capital P's, guys, the presence and power of God within its walls. We are greatly indebted to the doctor in attendance there, for he, although it might prejudice his own work, has told us of his belief in ours. Anything, June?
I have indebted, which is owing gratitude or recognition, and prejudice, which is preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so first, that paragraph that David started, under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many Eastern cities. So we're talking about New York. But what I don't understand is what they're talking about in that first part of it. Under only what are those slightly different conditions? I don't know what that is. I really don't. Just why are they different? I'm not sure. But so we're talking about New York, and then we flip the page, and one of these is a well-known hospital. So we're talking about Towns Hospital, Charles B. Towns Hospital in New York, for the treatment of alcohol and drug addiction. Yes, drug addiction back in the 1920s. 6 years ago, one of our number, Bill Wilson, was a patient there. Many has felt for the first time the presence and the power of God within its walls. I want to talk about that for a second. Going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's where I felt for the first time in my life the presence and the power of God in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Honestly, because all of a sudden I felt part of. I don't know when that happened. If it was at my first meeting, was at my 30th meeting. I'm not even sure when it was, but I just know that I wanted to come back that I wanted to do something. I wanted to chair the meeting. Well, I didn't really want to chair the meeting, but I dreamed about it. Like I practiced how it works all the time, right? So I knew that's something that they read, and I didn't want to mess it up if I ever got a chair. I don't think too little of myself or too much of myself, dude. That's all I do is think of myself. So I just want to be prepared for all those things. But I was thinking that is really actually the first time I really felt the presence and the power of God. And when I go to meetings today, I can feel the same exact thing. Or like going on a Zoom meeting, Howard's Big Book studies. Like I feel the presence of God because I hear him speaking to me. When like David, I love Joe Hawk. I love Herb K. I love Ramers and Charlie and Katie Parker and all these people that just totally bring it for me, and I feel the presence and the power of God. And Paige, it's like, dude, if you haven't heard Paige, where you been? Zoom in. It's like she's fire, and it's contagious. But I wanted what you guys had, and I wasn't quite sure what it was until I took the healthy risk and get myself a big book sponsor. And I didn't get a big book sponsor really in the beginning, but I got a guy who cared enough about me that I had access to, someone I could confide in, somebody I could relate to, someone that was kind, and I felt safe around. He didn't really know much about the big book, and he sponsored me for years and years and years. But I got a big book sponsor now. But I always felt the presence and the power of God when I was around him too, because he lived it, he exhumed it. It just came out of him. That's what I was so attracted to, So yes, the fellowship does that for me. But my obligation is to get into the work here so that I can recover, so I can give that to someone else, so they can feel the presence and the power of God within themselves. And then it says, we are greatly indebted to the doctor in attendance. So we're talking about Silky there. Therefore, he, although it might prejudice his own work, it was kind of a heresy for him to be talking the way he did, read the doctor's opinion. That wasn't like he figured out what our problem was, that when we put alcohol, cocaine, dope, food, gambling, whatever we put in our bodies and or do to ourselves, that we have no power, no choice, no control, that we break out in craving. And he figured that out. But he couldn't announce that to the world because that would have been heresy. So he couldn't say that because he felt like he'd lose his doctor's license. But and thank God he came around to thinking or they helped him come around to thinking that, this is okay. Let's broadcast this to the world. Let's tell everybody that we need to know about this craving. And that was the first thing that I ever learned, I think, out of the big book, was that when I take a drink or I do some cocaine, and this is the first time it made sense to me, I can't stop once I start. Oh, it was a revelation. I just thought I was weak-willed. I honestly didn't get it until someone explained it to me, and I was blown away. Like, so that means if I stop for 20 years and I start again, I'm still going to be powerless? Yep. That's what it means exactly. It's going to mean. And I've seen it happen. And it's a shame, and they die quickly. And there's stories in the book that talk about that also. A story in the book that talks about that also. So, so that's about where I'm at. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much to add here. Again, just sort of context check what's being discussed in this paragraph. So, I was thinking about it and I went backwards. I'm not sure what they were talking about under only slightly different conditions. I never really honed in on that before either. So, whatever it is, they were basically doing the same thing as how I'm reading this, right? And
Howard's got us after the meeting.
Yeah, he'll fill us in. Towns Hospital we brought up, and Howard put a really cool attachment there in the chat, so check that out. And 6 years ago, one of our number was there, so Bill. And so talking about this hospital that was such an important place, right? Because of the volume of the alcoholics and drug addicts who went through the hospital that were treated by Dr. Silkworth and others, right? So it was very much an important institution, an important building, an important entity. And so many of us has felt for the first time the capital P presence and capital P power of God within its walls. So talking about within the walls of that hospital, right? That was so important to our history, starting for AA. And as David was talking about, and I've had this experience too. I have had this experience in the rooms or within the walls of meetings, early on in recovery and still today, and also some other facilities. Sometimes people have a really great experience in treatment centers, and sometimes treatment centers get a bad rap in and outside the rooms, Alcoholics Anonymous. Whatever it takes, guys, whatever it takes for people to get on the right path, treatment center or no treatment center, jail or no jail, whatever the situation and the roads we travel, it's all good. All help is good help, right? And we're greatly indebted to the doctor for attendance there. David mentioned this is, referring back to Dr. Silkworth and the work he did with Bill. And we owe so much to that doctor. Joe and Charlie do such a nice job of talking about it in the big book Comes Alive. About David used the word, heresy. This is a fancy sort of biblical term, right? But what it really was nobody believed that alcoholism and addiction back in this period of time was a real illness. They just thought we were sort of bad people who, made bad decisions, sort of jerks, that we were immoral. Nobody really understood that we were sick. And that's what Dr. Silkworth really figured out. He's like, oh, yeah, you guys are selfish and you are jerks, but guess what? You're also sick, and there's some relief in that, because if I'm sick, I can get healthy. Right? Okay, moving on. Every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. Understanding our work, we can do this with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. Let me read that one more time. Understanding our work, he can do this, suggesting the approach, with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. Many of us former patients go there to help. Then in this Eastern city, there are informal meetings, such as we have described to you. You may now see scores of members. There are the same fast friendships. There's the same helpfulness to one another as you find among our Western friends. There's a good bit of travel between East and West, and we foresee a great increase in this helpful interchange. Nothing, June? Okay.
Yeah, so here's the doctor. Every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. So he has an understanding of what the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous has to offer, which is recovery, which is a personal relationship with God. So he's talking about a 12-step work, out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the work isn't just necessarily 1, 2, 3, leave, 1, 2, 3, leave, 1, 2, 3. It's actually getting into 4 through 9 so I can get recovered, and then practicing the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. And then, so he understands the work, but he also said he can do this with an eye to selecting those who are what? Willing and able, the can-nots or the will-nots, right? He can see that. I can see that. David talked about it with this guy that we met on Monday night. We made the approach. We tried to qualify him and we found out a little bit more about the guy. And maybe we'll find out a little bit more as time goes on. But the thing is, I got to know dude, are you a real alcoholic? Because I go to a lot of meetings where I don't think, I go to Cocaine Anonymous, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And some of the people that go to my Sunday morning meeting, I didn't mean to say that, Sunday morning. The meeting that I go to in town, they're not all alcoholics. They're hard drinkers. They don't need to work this stuff, but they need to shut their yap and just be observers, if you ask me. And they drive me crazy. And there's actually one guy, I don't know what he is, but anytime he sees me, David will tell you this, he leaves. As soon as he sees me walk into the room, he's out. He's gone. I'm one of those big book thumpers that he can't stand. And I'm sorry that he feels that way. I don't mean to offend him in any way, shape, or form. I don't. I don't know how I ever harmed him, but he leaves. But so Silky has this amazing ability, because he's worked with whatever it was, 40,000 people over time, and was able to tell who was willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis, not on their own power. This is so much different than I ever imagined it to be. And I keep continually learning too. I keep being a student of this whole thing, what the spiritual basis looks like. Like every day, like I took a phone call from a guy I mentor at my business. So he has his own business. We all have a franchise. And he called me today and he was on fire. And all he did was give him some simple direction in his life that I do all the time. And he's not an alcoholic or drug addict, not at all. And when I met the guy for the first time, I said to him, because I knew he was suffering from something, and I believed it was spiritual in nature. And I asked him, I said, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "No, I'm kind of agnostic." I go, "Fantastic." I go, "Then how do you feel about how about praying?" He goes, what do you mean? I go, could you get on your knees every morning to pray to something? Instead, could you do that? And he goes, yeah, I could do that. I said, are you willing to do that? And then when you go to work, would you be willing to open up the door and let God walk in first? And then I also suggested to him some other things that I won't share here at this Zoom meeting. And he's actually doing these things. And within 3 weeks period of time, his internal condition starts to change and his outside world starts to get a little bit better. And he's starting to match his insides with his outsides. And dude, I listened to him for a half hour being on fire today. That was not the same guy 3 weeks ago. Again, I take no credit for that. I'm just carrying the message of what worked for me about a relationship with God. And he started talking. Here's what he was saying to me today. I was blown away. He goes, man, he goes, I'm so blessed I got this neighbor. And I'm so blessed that this happened with my customer today. And I'm so blessed that I got this district salesman. Dude, he kept saying the word bless, bless, bless. I'm like, where does that come from? That comes from inside. It's an internal condition that I have that I suffer from with an internal solution that I must have. And so to recover on a spiritual basis, many of us former patients go there to help. This is what we do. We round ourselves up when we go. David and I have commitments. You know, we used to have a couple of treatment centers that we go to, and I've gone to jails and prisons and stuff like that. I used to have commitments to those things too. Then there are informal meetings such as we described to you, where you may now see scores of members. So sometimes I'll run into people everywhere I go. You know, David talked about having hundreds and thousands of people that we know. Yeah, I usually bump into somebody I know somewhere at the grocery store. I do. And it's cool. Nice hug. I don't break anybody's anonymity. Just don't do that kind of stuff. I don't know who he's with necessarily or she. And then it says there are the same fast friendships there and the same helpfulness to one another as we find among our Western friends. So I love how they describe that. That just means the West Coast. And there's a good bit of travel between the East and the West. We foresee a great increase in our helpful interchange. So yeah, I think that's how we carry this mission. And I think Zoom has done an amazing job. I mean, I found so many great literature-based meetings. You can't, you have to trip over it. How could you not? There's so many strong literature-based meetings, you know, that we can go to. I could rattle off a ton of them right now that I've attended over whatever the last 4 years are, whatever it is. And it just connected me in a different way. And so, yeah, so great increase in my sobriety, great increase with my fellowship, and a great increase in my recovery today, because that's what the triangle looks like.
So every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. So what's our approach? Well, again, we're on page 162 plus with those 8 pages of the doctor's opinion. The approach is pretty much laid out in there, right? It's our problem, it's our solution. So the problem with, you know, the powerlessness and the unmanageability, the solution, which is the spiritual awakening, and then we got all these steps that help us get from the problem to the solution, right? Work those steps 1 through 12, and then what else? Get into this lifetime of service, carrying the message and beyond, and be a part of this thing. Help grow this thing, be in the unity, right? That's our approach. And I love this, understanding our work. So here's a doctor who understands what 12-step recovery is all about. Yeah, okay, this is a pretty special doctor because he figured out what was wrong with us. So obviously he's more than professionally and emotionally committed to us and what we do. But there's a big function in our service structure that's known as cooperating with the professional community, right? And a big part of this in fellowships is getting relationships with doctors and hospitals and all sorts of institutions so that they have awareness about, you know, what fellowships like Alcoholics Anonymous have to offer. We can educate other people. When I moved out here to Sandwich in 2012, and I went to see my physician for the first time, and I was telling her about me, and I said, hey, at the time, I don't know, I'd been sober for however many years, I don't know, 8 years, I guess, at the time. And I said, yeah, I'm clean and sober 8 years. You know, I used to be addicted to this, that, and the other. And she's like, wow, that's great. She said, you don't drink at all? I said, no, not even a little. I said, not even a little, nothing. And she said, that's great. She said, I might use you, you know, in the town Hinckley, which is the next town north of here. She said, it's a terrible heroin problem. And I'm, guys, I'm in the middle of sticks here. And I said, anyone you want to send my way, give them my number. You have my permission. And she'd never taken me up on that. Or, you know, she asked if she could, and she never took me up on my willingness, but maybe one day yet she will. You know, maybe it'll be patient, or you never know. Sometimes it's somebody's kid, right? It's not even in the network. Sometimes it's someone right there in the family, right? But the doctors have to understand what we do. And then, so understanding our work, I just talking about that. he can do this. He can suggest the approach with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. So, two different things. And really, there's three considerations here. One is, cannot or will not. David talked about that, and we're familiar with that line from our How It Works reading we've done a million times. But what about the doctor's evaluation? Not if the patient just is willing and able, but if the spiritual basis of recovery is even right for them, which takes us back to 44 and these qualifying questions, right? So as we get into the chapter, We Agnostics, on page 44, think about what we were reading before in the three chapters before and the doctor's opinion. So we had doctor's opinion, we had Bill's story, there's a solution, and more about alcoholism. All these, David mentioned it earlier tonight, 43 pages, principally about powerlessness, right? Physically and mentally. And so there's a little recap on the top of 44. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. So by page 44, we hope you've figured it out. We've done an adequate job of explaining it. Here's the questions. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, so when you honestly want to, can you quit entirely, altogether? Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, so when drinking, do you have little control over the amount you take? It's a consideration for newcomers. So in either of these ors, if that's the case, you're probably alcoholic. So this is a determination that Dr. Silkworth was making. And then he was using some judgment, some discernment. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So Dr. Silkworth was treating these alcoholics and drug addicts, and he was looking at them and he's like, from what I've learned in treating this patient, when they start drinking, they can't control the amount they drink. And I dry them out and they go right back to drinking. So there was, now we've got like a little pamphlet with 47 questions. Figure out if you're an alcoholic. Back in the day, there was 2. It was these. That was it, right? But this is great. So the doctor asked these 2 questions and he said, in my judgment as a physician and knowing what I do about this illness, this guy needs a spiritual solution. And then to decide whether or not he was going to suggest it, he had to then determine, is this guy willing and is he even able, right? And what is the able? There's usually some sort of blocker that's bigger than the person. I'll take the unwilling. That's okay. Let's talk it out, because I can turn unwillingness into willingness, with enough study and with the other person getting beat down enough. I can't do it. I'd like to think of low enough bottom to turn unwillingness into willingness. The cannots, it's a little trickier, right? Because sometimes there's some things beyond recovery that people got to sort out, and sometimes the medical intervention, right? So the key is here, we had this wonderful advocate who was bringing people to us, and he was in the driver's seat to figure out, was this guy a real alcoholic? And if so, do I think he can get into the spiritual solution? I think that's all I got about that, which is perfect. I think we're right on time. Let me kill the recording.